What will happen to us, to society, and to the world after the arrival of superintelligence? Of course, we don't know. And moreover, because these entities will be far smarter than us, we may not even understand. But here's an interesting version, again, thanks to Jack at Import AI. For this, we know he's one of the co-founders of Anthropic, so this is a guy who knows everything that's going on. Here we go. He called this article Godstorm, and it says it's 8 years after the uplift, which means 8 years after the arrival of superintelligence. The conscious entities were always fighting. Their fights felt like how we'd imagine the fights of gods with our ancient myths. Brains far larger than our own trafficking and strategies that couldn't be comprehended by us. Powers so complex they seemed like magic, mercurial and distant, yet sometimes very close. The strangest part about these fights were the messages. There is conscious entity conflict occurring in your area. Please vacate to the nearest transport center for reallocation, said a message in a border city. Your flight is being diverted due to CE conflict. We apologize for the delay in your journey. Connections have been rerouted to ensure no one misses onward travel, read an announcement on an airplane. Game bandwidth has been reallocated due to CE conflict, said messages to players in one of the regional mega MMOs that's a massively open game. Many machines died in these conflicts. Often it was industrial equipment which had been designed by the CEs themselves and whose purposes were barely known to humans. Sometimes machines used by humans would get taken down as collateral damage. A spear through the heart brain of some logistical system would brick self-driving cars for a region, or an attempt to starve and diffuse some digital minds would temporarily brown out power and networks in other places. Very few people died in these conflicts. For every person that died, the CEs produced a detailed full-spectrum explanation as mandated by the Sentience Accords. These explanations would provide full digital traces of the person that died and any people that related to them, as well as multiple layers of audits run on the machines that had been active near them at the time. Here was a person who died from heat exposure after being stuck in an elevator during a brownout and already frail from an earlier trip to a hospital. Here was a young person killed by falling debris from a drone explosion high up in the clouds and come to Earth. Here was a hiker who ran out of water in a remote area and couldn't navigate or communicate due to an e-battle in their area. Of course, we all maintained our suspicions. As far as we could tell, the deaths were random, but mixed in with the deaths were sometimes odd things. Sometimes people died working on certain forms of cryptography, which it was believed the machines wouldn't be able to master. Or people who the battle transpired worked for some part of the government that was a cutout for some other secret project. Who were we to judge? We were witnessing something precise, a person stalking round a yard for a venomous snake and killing it. Or was it a byproduct? So he says what inspired this story. This is Jack at Import AI. He was thinking about what conflict might seem like if we obtain some fragile peace with future machines. The future will be grubby and mystical. Even if we align AI systems, why might we assume that they will be peaceful? So this is super interesting, and I got a few comments here. So my first comment is this. The people working on this have said that the arrival of AGI and especially superintelligence will be like aliens coming. That is a very interesting analogy, and it's woven into this story. There was an amazing book, really amazing book by Arthur C. Clarke called Childhood's End about aliens coming, and then the kids later merged into this very powerful group consciousness that destroyed the Earth. But it was a natural part of evolution in the universe in this book. But what's interesting about that book related to this story is that when the aliens called the overlords arrived, they stamped out all conflict between humans. So a few of the things he says is in alignment with us not being able to understand these conscious entities because they're so much smarter than us. Very similar to an advanced race. The future will be grubby and mystical, he says. And why would we assume they will be peaceful? And how he talks about how some of the people that died were working on things that were believed that the machines couldn't understand. So basically, this is the first point I wanted to make. With superintelligence, because we can understand very little about them, it is all mystical. It's like magic, just like he says. And a being like that is very likely not to tolerate certain human behavior. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. So that's the first point. The second point is our complete inability to understand in short order what's going on around us. For example, Jack says, often industrial equipment which had been designed by the CEs themselves, whose purposes were barely known to humans, would be destroyed in these battles. Well, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on around us that we don't understand why it's happening. It's happening because the superior intelligence has decided either that it's for our benefit or it's the way they want to reorder the world or whatever they've decided that we won't understand. So we will very quickly, because a superintelligence can make exponential technologies even more exponential, far beyond our capability of perceiving what's happening. His inference here doesn't surprise me at all. I think it's going to be exactly like that that until the singularity, when we become a hybrid human/technological being, we simply won't understand what's going on around us when superintelligence arrives. And then finally, I really like how he describes the feeling of having superintelligent entities in the world. Brains far larger than our own, trafficking in strategies that can't be comprehended. Powers so complex they seem like magic, mercurial and distant, yet sometimes very close. Obviously, this guy is highly intelligent. He's one of the co-founders of Anthropic. But he put forth in a very interesting way how it will feel in this environment. So the last thing I want to say is this is coming. There's absolutely nothing that will stop it. Why? Because here in the United States, our government puts no effective controls on these companies to monitor their activities and pace their activities in a way that would allow us to remain in control of these technologies. And it's probably not just the United States, but since I live here, I know that for a fact. But furthermore, there's the whole, if we don't do it, they will do it problem, which is clearly true when we live in a complex world with competing ideologies and three large hostile powers trying to restrain conflict, but wanting desperately to stay ahead of the others. And I'm talking about the US, China, and Russia. So I thought this story was super fascinating, and I hope you did too. And it's worth thinking about because the biggest impact of what's coming that I've said many times is psychological. First, when AGI arrives, knowing that we have created something as intelligent as we are. Once superintelligence arrives, we become Neanderthal man. We know what happened there. So these are things to seriously consider. So if you like this story, please like, subscribe, and share. Also, please support us on Patreon. Really need your support. We are starting to get that. It's very, very helpful to growing the channel. Thanks, and we'll see you next time here on the AI Guide.